You ready?
Sure.
Hey there, Bob from Oregon's Constant Gardener. Welcome to the OCGFAM show to you, my YouTube buddies. It's viewer question 7. They're exciting. Scott, you ready to get started?
That's what we're telling us.
All right. I'll turn you up a little bit here. What the deuce? All right, there we go. Okay, easy to slip. I've noticed all of the foliar feed recipes in the Nectar for the Gods Bible say to use Hygeia hydration. Is that true?
Probably.
Or another wetting agent. Is it okay to foliar spray without the wetting agent? What if I just spray twice as often? What if I just spray twice as often?
Good theory. I don't think your plants would be all that upset, really.
So the wetting agent is not necessarily exactly why you invented Hygeia, is it? Or you didn't invent it, but you made it. You had some reasons behind doing Hygeia, did you not?
Yeah, I mean, originally our Hygeia wasn't designed so much. I mean, it works well as a wetting agent.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't designed for foliar feeding, although by all aspects of what a wetting agent is, it's a great foliar feeding.
Sure.
But usually with wetting agents for foliar feeding in our world, it's usually, in combination of like an IPM management, some pest management program.
Something you need to linger on there, not get sucked in.
We want to encapsulate it. We want it to be a barrier. We want to break the surface tension so it holds, and then it makes a barrier that the insect has to eat through to get to the plant. So it kind of helps them destroy themselves through their greed of need of feed.
So I have a bunch of questions. I'm sorry, I may have cut you off there. So does this affect the pH when you use a wetting agent?
Depends on the wetting agent, but with yucca it shouldn't. I mean, it's pretty neutral. Okay. So the main thing there, it's more about it's a barrier. So it creates a spreader sticker, so it breaks the surface tension of the material that's in the spray bottle. It breaks the surface tension on the leaf surface, so it gets better coverage, and then it holds it on that leaf surface for the protection. Now, like with bloom caps, we encourage you not to use a wetting agent because we want the cell penetration, not the elongation of having it sit there on the foliar or the foliage throughout a period of time. We want it to be absorbed and then dry. And usually with foliar feeding, like Athenas or Megamorpheus or whatever, Pegasus, Poseidon, we want the plant to absorb it at the time of contact. So if it has a nice consistency to it, your water isn't horrible, and your foliar feeding, they should be able to just consume it at the time of spray. The runoff becomes part of a food source in the root zone, it'll drip down into the potting soil. I don't use a lot of wetting agents in my feeds, but I use wetting agents in the pest control.
What is surface tension? What are you speaking of there?
Well, if you take a drop of oil and put it on a glass of water, it'll sit there in a little ball and bubble, and it won't even out. So saponins, soaps, or yucca is a saponin, and it basically helps break down that fatty acid and spread it evenly amongst the surface. So it helps take oils and emulsify or blend them into water.
And so that it can spread out and it can be absorbed in, instead of this is kind of like when you jump off a diving board, you go right through the water, but if you jump off a bridge, you hit it flat. That it's like it holds together, or like that.
I mean, that's called terminal velocity, and the surface tension becomes too hard. So the faster you hit water, the harder it becomes. The slower you go in the water, the easier it is to enter when the wetter you become.
Well, like that goo they put on the pool, and you can walk across the pool, but if you stop, you'll sink in, kind of situation.
Yeah, baking soda and. No, that's a whole different
thing.
What is that? Newtonium? Newtonium. Yeah.
Okay, so then I don't understand.
Different than that because that's its own chemistry of, slow and hard. But with water, it's, it's oil and water. It's different weights. It's different structures. One repels water, one absorbs water. So it's putting those two together, oil and water, they don't mix, and the only way to mix it is to help break down the oil with fatty acids or saponins to blend it to the water. Okay, so whatever we're mixing, we're going to be mixing a little tiny bit of it with a whole lot of water and then spraying it on the plant. And all this stuff, I still don't understand. And all of our products are water soluble, so everything that's your foliar feeding with are water soluble. They're not oil based, so you don't need to break the surface tension of the water because they blend with the water. If you're using pest control, they're usually oil-based or petroleum-based. They need to be broken into the water, or else they just sit on the top of the spray bottle. You spend 25 minutes foliar feeding water, and the last minute, all the neem oil you have. So
I understand now. I never understood this before. Okay, so when you're doing foliar feeding, you wouldn't. If you were doing foliar feeding, not IPM or any kind of pest management, you would not ever use a wetting agent, or is there any circumstance under which you would?
No, I mean, it won't hurt anything to use a wetting agent during foliar feeding. It isn't as beneficial as you think it would be because you don't need it to hold there because you want the plant to absorb it. Now, if you're 32% humidity, constantly dry, and you want it to hold on that surface a little bit longer to help penetrate those cells longer, get more feed in there, use a wetting agent. It absolutely works fine for that. But for us, Hygieia was designed because of hydrophobic soils, dry pockets in the soil, fungal food for the mycorrhiza. You know, it's kind of working more about working with the soil condition and tilth than it was to foliar feed the digested proteins that we put in the bottles.
Okay, to that end, would I use Hygieia hydration every single time I do a root drench, or is it only when I have a dry soil condition? Is there any other condition other than that where I might use it?
I mean, it's a food source for microbes. So literally it's, you know, use it if you want to feed your microbes or if you have super dry soil that's hydrophobic. Using it every single time, you'll never have hydrophobic soil, and your mycorrhiza field and your fungal field will be very pleased because you're feeding them those saponins.
Okay.
Yeah, it prevents runoff on the bottom just racing right through the pots. It helps pull that moisture to the sides of the pots to feed more of the root mass. So, I mean, using it every single time definitely won't be harmful by any means, but using it just for certain occasions is definitely pretty normal in our groups.
Okay, so if I have hydrophobic soil, I should absolutely use it. But if I do not or don't have a problem with that, I could use it, and the only reason I wouldn't use it would be money.
Yeah, budget, and
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because like in our potting soil, number 4 soil, number 8 soil, the 4-shot, and even number 2, there's yucca meal in those soils to help prevent hydrophobia.
So I'm using the Greek regimen. There's probably 3, 4, 5 other things I would add before Hygieia.
Oh yeah, no, Hygieia is up there with like my fixing stuff personally.
It's a tool or possibly a Roman addition for that. Hydrophobic soil, it's a tool. Using it would be more of a Roman type situation. There's many other things that will give you more benefit before than after.
Yes.
Okay, now, is there any circumstance where I would do Bloom Chaos with Hygieia or anything else other than just the Bloom Chaos?
I mean, I don't ever see a reason to use Bloom Chaos with Hygieia. It would slow down the Bloom Chaos's reaction to the plant.
Okay.
Mixing other components that are in Bloom Chaos are totally fine. You can enhance your potassium by adding some more Poseidon to the Chaos. You can add a little bit more stimulant by adding some Zeus, the humic acid, fulvic acid to the Zeus, or to the Chaos. Athenas and Minas, because it's just amino proteins, that can be added to the Chaos as a spray. But what I usually tell people is if you're already mixing those foliar feeds in one recipe, and you have Chaos alone in a recipe, just alternating them back and forth, just go for the reaction with Chaos and then go for the feed with the more of a recipe of a feeding schedule, you know, like Medusa, Morpheus, and Pegasus to give them a boost, you know. You wouldn't need Chaos in that, just do Chaos by itself.
So you can't imagine a scenario for using the Hygieia, and the other things you mentioned with Bloom Chaos are out there without a care. They're like on the frontier, pushing hard, trying some different things. For the most part, in 99%, you would use Chaos by itself?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Do you ever mix anything with Chaos, you personally, Scott Ostrander?
Have I ever, or do I ever?
Do you, as a practice, ever?
Currently, no, because I also Chaos by itself in a spray bottle with good neutral water can last 5-6 days. So I just make up Monday and then I keep it in the bottle till Sunday.
Okay.
So, I mean, the reaction gets a little less throughout time, but it's cost effective and I can keep that bottle going. Now, if I mix that in with amino or thenas, then I got all these amino acids that are sitting there trying to break down, and you start to get more fragrance from the product. And there's these very minute particles in these different solutions that will want to react with Chaos. So the longer they sit in the solution together, they become less and less effective. There's still a food source. There's just no holy crap reaction that happens.
So don't do it, but probably not.
Well, certainly try it in your garden and see what works best for your space and your environment, and your humidity and lighting and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But scientifically, the Chaos does not need Hygieia to work. We prefer you don't use Hygieia to make Chaos work, and Chaos works best without Hygieia. Okay,
but if
as a foliar feed.
If you're doing some neem oil or some light oils or some of that stuff, you would definitely throw some Hygieia in there.
Oh, absolutely. Like Hygieia for my horticultural dormant spray for all my fruit trees. Absolutely. Put it in there, mix it all together. It creates a nice spreader sticker on the surface of the leaves. It prevents molds and mildews from happening. A lot of people use it in their neem oil. There's a bunch. I mean, if you're using it for what it was intended to be, a sticker on the plant, it works great for that.
But as a nutrient to the stomata, to the thing, probably not.
It's not. No, it's more of a fungal food than it is a plant nutrient. It's great for microbes in the soil. That's what I really like about it. Is it goes in and actually it's a diverse food source for the microbial field, and it just keeps them more in balance.
Left field. Would you use this with SLF? Like pouring it in something? I mean, or like when you maybe use some Hygrozyme or something of these natures. Would you use this as a restorative thing when you were throwing some microbes in there?
No, because again, it's a sap, and so it's like basically, put a couple drops of dish soap in some water, stick a straw in there, blow on it, and then throw some microbes in there and see where the microbes are going to live. They're going to live inside those bubbles and not in the soil.
Oh.
So, with those, again, they're kind of like a compost tea, SLF, Photo Plus, any of these microbial products. You want to just get them into the soil as they're spore or in their liquid forms. They're all soluble, or they're in soluble solutions. They can be added to water, still be soluble and watered right in. So having it in there with if you mix up a whole Roman regimen and want to add your microbes after the pH and then feed, there's not enough in that to actually become a burden on the microbe as far as like encapsulating little bubbles. But if you're just mixing SLF, Hygieia in water, mixing it really good and then pouring it in, there's no need for that. There's no benefit to anybody. So now, taking yucca meal and putting it in your compost tea, it's a fungal food. It's a bacterial food. They'll eat it, and it's a great food source for them. Adding Hygieia to your compost tea will just create an explosive Brady Bunch laundry room situation.
So, to repair hydrophobic soil and as a wetting agent for IPM, otherwise, maybe. But those are the main uses. That's the tool you intended it to be.
Great for pest control, great for making sure things stay on the leaf, great for hydrophobic soil.
Okay, I just made an episode there is why I wrapped it up like that.
Yeah, I see that. So, stay tuned.
You're going to see that tomorrow.
And you didn't even mention the Brady Bunch episode where they...
Hold on!
Soap in the washing machine.
I was thinking I rolled right over the top of that. Who was it? Was it Marcia that did it, or was it Cindy? Because it sounds like a Cindy thing.
No, it was Jan, for sure, a Jan thing. She's the middle child.
Fucking Jan.
Her, so she had to start doing stupid stuff.
Well, what do you think? How do you think Jan ended up if that show had gone on? I think she was like that kind of really...
School shooter.
She was wound tight. She was tight.
She was hated. She was the stepchild, I swear. Yeah. She was Sam's offspring. I think Mrs. Brady had a Sam's kid.
That could. That's probably why they brought... Sam was a sexy beast, wasn't he?
He was a butchering hoe.
That's probably why... Oh my God, can you imagine? You know what I think? I don't think Sam went to war. I don't think he was actually in the Army. I think he was like, he had flat feet or something, and he was just tearing that up. The whole World War II situation.
Oh, and your husband's over there?
Yes!
Let me bring you some steak.
And so when the war was over, he, scaled it back because, but he still had some skills, and probably put a few in a few.
3,700 offspring running around the little town of wherever the heck they were in Brazil.
All right. Dub C, are you still spraying this while on roots after roots? So this question is about when we talked about the mother plants and then making the cuttings and then foliar feeding the cuttings. Okay, so that's what this question is about. It says,
gotcha.
Are you still spraying this while on roots? After roots develop, would you put this to the root drench till they're ready for a meal? So he's asking, would you take the foliar feed and use it as a root drench when these cuttings have developed some preliminary minor root systems?
You certainly could. It would be it's the same concept of feeding the tops, but now you're going to be able to feed the roots. What I would do is dilute it down a little bit because you don't have roots. You got like a root or two. So you want to take your foliar feed and maybe even cut it in half for the first few waters to help it develop more roots. But if it's just starting out with fresh little roots, it's safe to use. Just cut it in half.
So, the missus is going to show up, and I got the dog barking. So just some stuff may happen here to the audience and to you. So, can you overwhelm those roots? Obviously you can, but can you talk about that as to when you're just starting to develop roots? Can you overwhelm those roots? Oh, hold on a second. Oh, it's just a delivery person. Never mind. Can you overwhelm those roots? Can you harm those roots by overfeeding them? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely.
I know, but can you speak to that? What are we trying to?
Well, they're just developing, and really, when they're brand new like that, they have a lot of nutrition they're bringing onto the plant, so they're not really looking for the food more than the root development. And once they start diving into that medium and sourcing the food, by giving them too much, you can kind of retard their growth in a sense. If you don't burn them or anger them with overfeeding them, you can kind of retard their growth as they're trying to figure out why they had so much food at one time. So really easing into it, that's why cutting that foliar feed in half to start dabbling in the watering will do just as fine. It'll be more beneficial to the plant because they're getting these little trace amounts of food in the first stages of life.
So are you going just as strong with the foliar as you start to feed the roots, or are you transitioning?
It wouldn't hurt them at all because they're already used to that and they're doing it. So
just keep rolling with them.
Start the soil drench, or I don't even tease the roots with nutrition until I put them in their first potted soil. Or their first soil pot, and then once they're in that pot, then I'll start babying them into the clone / early veg cycle of the recipe.
Okay. Graybush 1976. That was a great year. 1976. Spirit of 76, bicentennial. You remember the tall ships, or were you too young for that?
I was 5.
So you saw the tall ships on the TV, right?
Yeah, that's back when we actually had parades and stuff.
Good stuff. Uh-huh.
That was back when it wasn't racist to be an American.
You could have a flag non-ironically.
Yeah, exactly. You're not hated because you flew your flag. So yes, I remember 1976 well, actually.
I really liked the 70s. I really did. It was nice. I liked the radio. I liked the crappy music, the Malays, Jimmy Carter.
It was the best music. The 80s destroyed music, and then Coke came to play, and it was a bad decade.
Not good. Not good at all.
Plus, day-glow orange and yellow shirts should never have been a thing.
See, I preferred the peach and lavender that were kind of a little subdued.
You're a Jersey shirt midriff guy, no question. You're like crew cut, Jersey shirt, 86 number, board shorts.
That whole thing.
Yeah, jeez. That was Bob, for sure.
Okay, Graybush 1976. Good knowledge. Can you disclose the Squatch's foliar recipe for mothers again? Now I think this question goes on. I want to say that no, you don't, because I want to go back over that little piece, because I just did that episode yesterday as far as what the foliar you had for mothers. I'd like you to go over what that actually was, and maybe we'll do a little shorty thing where we actually talk about what those measurements were and when you use them in more detail. So can we hold that till later?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the part I was interested in, though. I'd really like to hear from anybody running Nectar in an aero cloner, practical or no. Seems like the sediments for the emitters, but I've never used aero cloner yet. Just received one for Father's Day, ready to cut for a cut sesh. I'm going to start this foliar regimen, but would love to get specifics on the recipe. Any help would be appreciated. So when you're we're taking our cuttings, do you put them in an aero cloner? Is that what you do? I mean, you have to do that, right? They go in there for a while. Is that, or no?
Oh, I mean, if you're using aero clone, a lot of people use like the easy clone or
but you can't stick it in the ground. I mean, you have to put it in a cloner. Am I correct about that?
I know guys who throw their cuttings on dirt floors and they take root. So cloning is literally it's an anomaly. You're either super great at it, or it's a nightmare for you, or it's a teeter-totter of emotions. But for most cloners, because of the system and the way they design them, you don't need a lot of anything in the actual cloner. What you're going to be doing is prepping the mother with the foliar feeding.
Okay.
You've stored all that nutrition up in the tops of the plant. Then you make your cuts and they go into the aero cloner. In the aero cloner, as simple as SLF and a little tiny bit of like humic or fulvic acid, that's all you really need. Now, a lot of people can't get that to be successful for them, so they'll use a tiny bit of hormone like a rooting cloning like KLN or root dip. I don't know. Yeah,
not root dip. They say you can use that. I have my suspicions. There's those 2 or 3 products that are hormonal that you use to do that.
Easy be one.
Okay.
Dynagrow has one.
Yeah.
You know, the rooting hormones themselves, if you use them mildly, by the time a plant grows into their maturity, there's no sense of that ever being around, but it definitely helps trigger that root response. And just the on-off water cycle of those mists help promote that root development faster. So SLF added to your reservoir in your aero cloner, I think, is the most important component, because as you cut those little wounds on the stem,
you get that clean
bacteria, the bacillus living in there, are going to harbor those wounds and protect that from rot, protect it from being infected with a pathogen. And then as the roots develop, the bacteria in SLF will grow with those root tips and keep them clean and safe until you get into transplant. So, you know, I hate cloning, honestly. I do all mine in little, they're the rapid rooters, but not. They're, like, the brand is beyond me right now, but
it's a little
the original little spongy cocoa peat blends that are sponges, and that's always worked the best for me. I know, like, a lot of the bigger commercial guys I deal with, they can crush it in a 120 unit with 400 clones in there. So it really comes down to how it works best for each individual. But for an aero cloner, a little tiny bit of rooting hormone in the reservoir, SLF in the reservoir, maybe some humic or fulvic acid. Those both work great in there.
What is the purpose of the humic and fulvic acids?
Stimulant. I mean, it actually helps stimulate the cell growth, and then with the bacteria harboring those wounds, it kind of helps feed them. That humate will help feed them the bacteria, and then that keeps them living and colonizing. It's just a little bit of a food source for the microbes that are in the SLF.
So, but you personally don't have a problem with the root hormones, but you understand if someone did.
Oh, absolutely. Like that true hardcore, you know, I only cut a new moon people will never use a hormone because it's a synthetic hormone.
Sure.
Or, you know, a lot of people just use the hormones from kelp and seaweed as their source, but, you know, the success rate drastically goes up if you use a little bit of the hormones in these rooting agents.
So if you are not using the hormone for whatever reason, and you're using a little bit of Zeus and a little bit of SLF, and you're not getting good results, you may have to face the fact that you need a little bit of the hormones in your particular situation to get this thing to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to it myself, but
you don't do it.
Start over.
But you don't do any of that. You get the little peat moss and thing, whatever, and you stick it in there, and then you keep that wet with what? Just water?
Just a dome, my lighting, and I mist the inside of it every day. I make sure the sponge stays perfectly moist, not soaking wet because they'll rot, not dry because they'll dry out. So it's just that you play the nursery game for 7 to 10 days, and then once I see the tips come out of the bottom, I go right into my soil.
And what are you just water, or are you using the SLF and other things in there?
Oh, I just usually with my clones, I've gone now really simple down to just liquid seaweed and a little bit of Zeus, just to keep the nutrition there, because they're not eating from the root zone now. They haven't since you cut them from the mom. All the food I stored up in the foliage during the foliar spraying of the mom, that's in there just breaking down. I don't want to keep them too fed, because then they won't want to put out roots. And if I'm just feeding the tops, the roots are like, hey, they got this thing covered up top. We just have to sit here and kind of anchor in. I kind of like to let them use up their food reserve, and once that reserve starts to wane, they start to go looking for more food with their root system. So
but they don't find it though, because they're in this little peat moss thing. Am I correct?
No, I mean there's trace amounts of. I mean that's the beauty of fungus. Is fungus will make food out of rock. So, I mean, if there's living organisms, a little SLF and stuff drops in there during, because even with cutting and putting in those peat pellets, I hydrate the pellets with SLF with a little bit of kelp meal. I mean, I make a solution to soak my rooting tubes in.
Okay.
And then once they're wet, and then the nice thing about those little pellets or the rapid rooters is they go from a dark brown to a light orange when they're transitioning from dry to wet. So you can kind of look in there and go, yeah, they're starting to change color. I'll give them a little more hydration. So, but yeah, usually once the food wears out in the foliage, the roots are already starting to develop really well.
So a little bit SLF and what? You said some seaweed or something? What is it?
Yeah, I like Poseidon. I like kelp in mine because there's natural growth hormones in liquid seaweed, and the cold processed kelp has a lot more of those hormones that just naturally come from algae and seaweed and kelp. And
when you're saying kelp and seaweed, you're talking about Poseidon?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good answer. This is another one about the recipe, so I'm going to throw that one out. We'll talk about the foliar recipe. So, Herbal Jedi. What about when I transplant into number 4 soil? How long do I wait to feed them? And while I wait, what do I water with? So he doesn't say what he's transplanting. So we've talked about clones a lot. What if you're transplanting, like you're moving to a bigger pot or something like that? How do you feed right away, or do you?
So from my clone, because I'm assuming this has something to do with
the clone,
clones, and so with a clone, I put them in number 4 soil. I give them about a week before I actually will give them food.
Okay.
Because there's food in number 4, we built it in, so it's gentle. But when you have 5 little roots coming off of a tiny stick, they don't need a lot of food yet. So I let them acclimate for about a week. All I do is water pH adjusted water, and I usually have to bring my pH down for just straight water because it can be in the mid-8s. So I'll bring it down a little bit of Gaia just to get it in 6s. And
why are you pHing your water?
Huh?
Why are you pHing the water in this scenario?
Because 8.4 is never good to just water with.
It's just the water.
I mean, we're talking 4 roots coming out of a cloner going into a 1-gallon pot of number 4 soil, and I'm feeding at watering at 8.5. Nothing's going to be available to the little guys.
So it's about the availability of the nutrients in the soil, and them but them being upset by the water being out of whack with what they're trying to do at this point because they are so
little. Fragile.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm literally trying to hit that, because even if I get in the mid-6s, knowing that at 6.1 is where most of my nitrogen is going to be available in the potting soil, I'm still not trying to hit that for these first few waterings. I'm just trying to buffer my water down into the 6s. Most people that have like a 7.0 water or 7.1, I mean, that would be totally acceptable watering that in for a week just as water.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're above 7.5, then you might want to just bring your pH down a little bit, just so you're activating the protein in the potting soil so it can become available for the plant.
So when you're off that topic and onto up-potting, do you go through a couple of pots with your plants, or do you put them into a big giant one to start with?
No, I mean, if I was doing all autos, I mean, that's kind of the way you go. It's just go to the one you're studying. They don't like to be transplanted, but no, I do many steps. I'm a 1, well, depending on the round and the space and the time, but it's either a 1-3-7-15 or a 1-7-15.
And when you do that, how does your feeding go when you get to the next bigger pot, when you repot?
Well, because they're so mature at that point, and usually when I get from stage to stage, they've depleted the last stage. So when they even go in, you get the surface tension or surface area of a root ball going into a pot this big. Well, the root ball's still only this. So
right.
They're so hungry by that time. When I transplant, I water them in once or twice, but after that, it goes right back to feeding.
Okay. And
the food in number 4 is very mild, so you can pretty much hammer feed on top of it as long as the plant's mature. You can transplant and go stick with your feeding. I like to let them have a day of acclimation, but I mean, you could easily feed the same day and not have a problem.
Do they root into that soil automatically from the heavy feeding, or do you have do something different with your feeding as they're trying to build roots into that new pot?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, no, I don't soak down. So if I go from a 7 to a 15, I don't soak the whole 15 down at transplant. I'm literally trying to water that 7-gallon pot the same way I did 2 days ago, because I'm just trying to get that root ball hydrated, and then just enough to kind of get the first layer of the new soil wet, so the roots will want to naturally start growing into that moisture. If you soak down that whole 15 gallons, it takes forever for that ring to dry out, so your plants kind of tend to not want to grow out into the soaking wet soil in fear of being, rotted out or choked out with lack of oxygen. So, I kind of water the same 7-gallon pot for about 3 to 4 waterings to let those roots develop into the 15, and then I'll go increase my volume after that.
It's in that 7-gallon size, and if you water the whole thing, does it kind of dry it out here and then slowly it kind of wicks back in and it just stays where it is if you water
to an extent? But I mean, when you have, let's say, a 5-inch window on both sides of the root ball, and this is all soaked out here, it's not going to wick back in any time of reasonable time.
Right, and so it thinks
this area will be bone dry because the roots will have drank everything that hit the root zone. Everything on the edge of the pot's going to be soaking wet because it doesn't have any roots near it to suck it up.
And it thinks it's planted next to a river and it's trying to stay away from that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's like, we're going to die. Plus, you're 76 degrees in here with a 50-degree nighttime. It's just the recipe for root rot. So, no thank you.
Okay.
So the plant becomes hydrophobic, not the soil.
Interesting. Okay, we're really moving. Graybush 1976 again. Hey Bob, haven't seen any clips on cloning other than the old video with Tim. Great content. I'm switching from peat pellets into an arrow cloner. Did I just tell you that? I just did this one.
Well, it's asked twice.
It's the same question twice. So, no.
Oh, see, he even answered our question here. In addition to SLF and the rooting agent, in this case, I'm trying a product called FOOP.
FOOP!
It's just another frickin',
No, I do not want Dabradan.
Cutting-edge rooting hormone that's exactly the same as every other cutting-edge rooting hormone. So it's a rooting hormone. Yeah, whatever. It's a rooting hormone.
Hey, I was just thinking about FOP. No, I do not want FOP. I'm a Dabradan man.
Dabradan.
Isn't this place a geographical oddity? 2 weeks from everywhere.
Oh, brother, we're out.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's there you are. It's SLF and the rooting hormone from FOOP, or SLF and the rooting agent from wherever the heck, because nobody came up with a new rooting agent.
It's just what it is.
Yeah.
Well, root dip is kind of a different situation, isn't it? It says, I think it's non-hormonal, but...
But literally, like, if you have a glass of water on a south-facing window in your house and it's a cloudy day for 7 days, you could probably still get roots out of that, so...
All right.
These things root like tomatoes in most instances. Unless they're so crisscross and hybrided, they may have issues, but they do take root pretty easy. Okay.
So this is a lot of, we're talking a lot about this, but really just, let me ask you this. If they're not rooting, what's going on? Are there things you
Water temperature, oxygenation, lighting's bad, your root zone, if you're too cold in the root zone, too hot in the root zone, the finicky genetics can be kind of a nightmare. Where you took your clones from, the woodier the stem, the harder the root. If you
down low on the...
Yeah, cloning's like a 16-year conversation that could go back and forth, and it can be a bigger pissing match than organics versus salts, because there's so many ways to do it. Like I said, I have this old school guy that grows in beds in a shed under lights. We couldn't be more hillbilly redneck top of the mountain type grower, and when he prunes his plants, he just throws them on the floor. I mean, every guy out there that grows in commercial farms or in a clean farm is cringing at the thought of like dying or molding debris on the floor around the plants, and they take root. They take root laying sideways with nothing, no food, no hormone. Some people have it, some people struggle, and there's no absolute way. If we sat here and did a cloning class, your comments would be half people hate you, 25% killed it, 25% don't know what's happening. So it's,
So if it's not working, before you'd investigate your nutrients, you might investigate your intention and your method.
First, start over, do another round, and then maybe change up your hormone or your lighting. And really, like most people don't realize, aero cloners are great. In the summer, they're horrible because here's the problem. Your ambient air temperature is 89 degrees. You know what roots hate? 89-degree air temperatures being blown into a reservoir, cooking the water. So you kind of got to keep your water in that crisp, cool area without being too cold or get too warm or depleted of oxygen. So it's just a tricky scenario. That's one that I hate. You know what we don't have? A rooting hormone. Because I don't want to teach anybody about cloning, because
don't talk about it.
It can be a real nightmare, and it's not worth the battle to be blamed for it.
Okay, good answer. Larry Terhar, how late into flower can you use Chimera? So you're only using this one time, am I correct?
Well, I mean, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully just one time. Some water sources, some peat sources, some product sources, you may need 2 applications.
Okay.
If you didn't add enough at the very beginning. But usually, like, the thing I like about Chimera is the instant pH increase. So, like, if you're in week 4 bloom, you're at 5.7 on an 8-week flowering genetic, and you need to get that pH up, and you did just a limestone, well, now you're into end of week 6, going into week 7 before that limestone becomes actual usable, available, and buffering, because limestone's slow.
Oh, okay.
Because it's just limestone, so rock.
Yeah.
But dolomitic lime has that little bit of magnesium, and it's like a lime 99. It's a super fine hydrated lime that when it gets activated with water, it spikes the pH and then starts to come back down, releasing all the calcium and magnesium into the soil and the root zone. So the Chimera blend has just a little bit of dolomitic lime in it, just enough for, like, if you're in week 4, you could add it to a 5-7 soil. It will get you up to like 6-7 that day. And then as it waters through, then the limestone activates and then maintains it the rest of the way. Now the key would be, instead of doing 1 cup per 10 gallons as a corrective going into bloom, you could probably dwindle that down to maybe an ounce per 10 gallons of soil, because you're so late into flowering, you don't want to waste the product by putting too much down. And adding a full cup to the 10 gallons might take you from your 6 to 7, putting you out of range for a day or 2 on the other end, to just bring it back down for the last 2 weeks of flowering. So if you're like mid-flowering, that'd probably be the last I would use the Chimera. Outside, if I only had 2 weeks left, I'd be doing the carbonated water trick. Okay. Because that's a fix. It's now every feeding will be a feeding, and then next time this is traditionally a problem for your garden, make sure you get the Chimera in as you transition into flowering, and then you will never run into this issue again.
Is it plausible that you're going to see a pH issue right near the end? 4 weeks left, 3 weeks left, 2 weeks left.
Well, that's what we were discovering with people with RO, distilled rainwater, is that with every potting soil, with our potting soil, when they get into the 3rd week, they start battling the yellowing. They start battling the pH issues, and they can't feed them enough because they're always trying to correct pH and not food.
Okay.
Well, if you can get Chimera in there before that, you'll never run into that issue. And that's the thing, is anybody in week 3, because that seems to be the traditional RO guy and distilled guy, and end of week 3, their pH is 5.7. And that doesn't matter if you're in Tupper, number 4, Ritz Organics, Fox Farm. They see themselves down into the upper 5, low 6s at week 3, and they start to see the yellowing. That's going to happen every single time now. So now that we know this, we just have to build that limestone in right before we go into bloom. We'll never see that yellowing again, because now, as that water's been robbing us all those years, now we've given that water something to rob, and it won't stop stealing from our soil.
So it's 2 weeks out. I see my pH problem. I'm going to use the carbonated water. What am I doing there? What's that process?
Well, that's the one where, you know, you mix up all your normal foods, and then you jack your pH up with the Olympus Up, which is limestone.
Okay.
Jack that all the way up to 7.5 to 8.0. So now you got this food that's way out of range on the high pH side.
Okay.
And then with simple, you know, soda stream water or Perrier carbonated water, something that's non-flavored, that carbonated water is our carbonic acid. It's literally CO2 injected rainwater that can sit there and go into that mix with the 8.0 pH from Olympus Up, convert all the limestone carbonate that is in Olympus Up, convert that to a bicarbonate, dropping the pH back into the 6s, but now you've preloaded it with all the things that got robbed out of your soil to make you acidic in the first place.
Okay.
So Olympus Up is literally liquid chimera, but you have to react it with an acid. So here's our chimera, here's our liquid chimera, Olympus Up, pure limestone liquid. If I put it in there, it's too high to eat because the pH is too much, so we reduce it by shocking it with carbonic acid, rainwater, or carbonated water. That brings that calcium carbonate into a bicarbonate, reducing the pH. Now all your food is available to the plant to be eaten, and it won't be stealing from your soil because you've rebuilt the alkalinity into your water.
Okay, I'm 2 weeks out. I realize I have a pH problem. I do what you just...
You should just buy weed. I'm just kidding. You're a real problem.
You're the guy that just...
So, why is it always 2 weeks with you?
I'm still asking this question. How many more feedings do I have at 2 weeks out? And do I do that same thing with all of them? Or just that one time?
Because even with your final flush, if you're trying to do any of the Aphrodites and Herc flushing at the end, if you're flushing that at a 5.7, you're just wasting Herc and Aphrodites. None of it's available to your plant because the pH is so low. So it's like, that's great. You're loading me up with more gum so I won't drain as fast in your last few days. But if you correct that, it's literally driving that into the plant with bicarbonate. I mean, that conversion of limestone carbonate to bicarbonates with that carbonated water with Herculean in there, with Aphrodites in there, that just slams that food in there for the ripening process. So
my full feeding or my Herculean flush, either one, I would use the same process of using the carbonated water with overgoing with my Olympus and then dropping it back down with my carbonated water.
Yep.
But, okay.
It's the Band-Aid. It's not, I wouldn't want to do a commercial farm that way, and I wouldn't want to do 20 plants for the whole flowering cycle. But people that didn't get their limestone in early, I get this almost like 3 times, 4 times a week from growers going, all right, well, I'm 5 weeks in, my pH is at 5.7, everything's yellow, I've been feeding at 7.4, and it's like the downfall of like over pHing your feeds is that you're not counteracting the uptake, you're counteracting the soil pH, and that's going to take weeks to balance that pH back out. So you're missing the feed on the high end, your soil's on the low end, the food in the middle is just depositing, not being brought up, and so you're battling this battle the whole way. So doing that carbonation trick, we're not so concerned anymore about the soil pH in the root zone because it's too late. You can't fix it in time, so now we're going to fix the food. And the food is what rushes over. That's the 5-minute slurry we're looking for because that's what the time it's passing over the roots and they're sucking up as all they can. The rest of it just deposits out. So. This is the rescue inhaler for the asthmatic. This is we should have fixed the problem long ago, and we had a problem before we even knew, and we fixed that problem with the Chimera or whatever. Okay. Yep. Okay. So Larry Tahar had another question, and it was I said that you were the Chimera was going to soon be available to the general public, and he said, "Hey, I don't consider myself general public here. I'm in the family. Can I get some damn Chimera?" Yeah, I'm sure we can work something out. Tell Larry, to email you. There are samples available to We're working. The problem is every sample I've sent out comes in a one-shot sample bag, and then people think I'm blowing smoke up their butt. I'm like, watch this, you're screwing me with it. Does it have a red C on the bag? Well, I'm lazy and I'm cheap. I don't buy sample packaging. I mean, buying packaging to give it away for artwork is not my cake. I mean, everybody in this industry, they like put tens of thousands of dollars into sample kits to show we have the same black and white sample kit we've had for 14 years. I mean, that's how much we care about the marketing. So if you don't mind getting a one-shot bag with a big red C on it and then this crossed out and a mustache drawn on him and know that it's Chimera, I'm sure I can work with you. We're very close. I mean, we're literally waiting for 2 more states and then it's going on OCGFAM. Good. It'll go on OCGFAM way sooner than the rest of the country. There are a few places, if you know, Indoor Earthworm, they carry it in stock with paramagnetic rock, oddly enough. He's the only guy that sells paramagnetic rock around the country. So if you want shit that you can't get anywhere else, Indoor Earthworm sells it in O'Fallon. So make your way down to O'Fallon. There's a Horizon, they've got samples over in Michigan, so they got one in, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Byron Center, Kalamazoo. They've got Chimera samples to hand out to folks. And those are our bigger stores that we deal direct with. Well, they'll start getting this pre-packaged with labels. I mean, it'll say what it is, but it's going to be black and white stickers.
Sure.
Really low budget. Because we just don't care about the marketing piece.
More better to spend our time doing 700 YouTube episodes than to spend it trying to parse over what color and what font to use.
Yeah, as you know, we love the guys that do our marketing for us, the artists.
Yeah.
They do great work, but I mean, spending money on stuff we're going to put in a landfill is just beyond me. So I have like 40,000 of these because of the price point. If I bought 20,000, it would have cost twice as much as getting 40,000 50% off, right? So you buy 40,000. Well, guess what? This is going to be the sample for Pluto's Peak. This is the sample bag for Apollo's Rise. This will be Chimera. Shit, I'm going to figure out the liquid porcone in here until I can get rid of at least 25,000 of these.
You should do what do you call those things? Where you poke the little straw in. You should Capri Sun it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll make Capri Sun plant packs.
That's awesome. I think that's it, right? Well, actually,
it is. Although I did get, and we'll do a bigger one on this. But I've got Linda from the Facebook groups. There's a few customers. One guy, Jesse, from I want to say he's New York, and got great dogs. Sent him a bunch of gear for his dogs to wear. He should probably post some pictures in the group. But so the slurry thing, we need to do a whole show.
Yeah. Okay.
The slurry. So just to. Right now, I mean, I talk to a lot of people on different levels and different information, and I mean, there's a standard that if you're in the groups, the standard is a 7.0 distilled water, ideally, to do all your slurries out of. That puts the bar exactly with everybody has the same bar. There's a lot of people I deal with that don't live near places that have distilled water, they don't have the same access, and often I'll let them know, it's like, as long as your water's in range, if you water with a 7.2 water from your tap, I don't care if for my sake, to help that grower, I don't care if he's at 7.2 because I'm looking for references and patterns.
The trend, not the number.
Yeah, trend, exactly. So if I know that you're always these and you're having this issue, then I can mentally equate that here's what's causing it from your water source at 7.5. Guys that are at 9.5 and have no way of getting me a slurry for a week unless they pH their 9.5 down to 7, that's not ideal for any of us because now you have an acid in there that took your 9.5, so it converted all your calcium alkalinity, that would be a 9.5, into a bicarbonate, and you've added acid, so who knows what else we've released. Then you mix that with soil, so it could be hydrolyzing or making other things available, giving us a false reading. Again, looking for the trend, but if you have to pH that hard to get your water close to 7, then keep in mind that if you're going up to 7 or down to 7, you've added a hydroxide or a limestone, or you've added an element that could skew the actual slurry test. So it's a very good debate that they're having over there in the Nectar groups. The distilled 7.0 is by far the most accurate for everybody on the same page. But a lot of people will say, but you told me, and you I also go with the flow on how people are operating their budgets, their worlds, and their lives, and how they work. So I ask them what they can give me, and then I, with my own process, decide how bad their stuff is. And usually a picture, and knowing they're starting with 6.0 water, and they get in these numbers, and then looking at the picture, I can usually dictate, okay, well, that is because this is what's happening. But so it's a big debate. We'll do a whole episode. We'll get more slurry questions from folks. We'll get up some examples and kind of put it out there more in a visual, but spend a little more time on it. I just wanted to get it out there because they're talking about it right now.
Okay. So I guess we've done 730 whatever episodes. Someone could go back and watch every one and find inconsistencies, and that's not necessarily an inconsistency.
I ran for the president in 2016 because everybody, with every single day, if you can tell me what's going to happen in 3 months from now, and what happened 3 months ago, and tell me that was all planned, it's just
So
everything changes in a realm. Environments change, styles change, alkalinity changes. I mean, we've discovered so much in the last 12 months, things we already knew. But then all of a sudden came back, kicked us in the face, and then made us go hard into those just because the difference that we're seeing from investigating things we used to do and doing them a little bit differently is making all the difference in the world. So
it's not inconsistent. It's being open to change and open to changing circumstances and adapting to what you found and also what people have done in the larger community, taking that and slowly developing a thing. And so when you look at one thing from the past and here, you may see inconsistency, but we got here for a reason. We've got here for
100%. I agree with that, and I think these are plants. If you have a recipe to just grow a plant, and we all use that same recipe, we're not all growing the same plants. That's the problem. It's not. There is no perfect way to do what we're doing, but because of this community and the passion in this community, especially those Nectar groups, their passion and their want for the knowledge and their hunger to teach and most of these people just tell me how it should be done, so when I'm educating, I'm not misinforming these folks. And it's like, again, I don't think that nobody's intentionally misinforming anybody in the Nectar groups. They're definitely the kindest
best
people,
they can,
and it's amazing. But there's that piece that you always got to give yourself a little bit of give on both sides to make sure you're seeing and hearing the biggest picture, because that's the hardest part. Is when I get information from folks, I get this much of a text. It's just their problem, and it's like, okay, well, here's 48 questions, and those 48 questions are going to give me everything from, Brett, I know what your slurry is, I know how you perform the slurry, because most people say, I performed this slurry, I used distilled water, my parts per million were this, and then mixed, this is what I got. Or my starting water was at 7.6 at 250 parts per million, and then my slurry results are this. By giving me all the information and giving everybody all the information and the image, we can break down the different scenarios to kind of cater to that one grow. They're not all going to be identically scientifically the same. If you ask Blue Lab how to do a slurry, and you ask Frank how to do a slurry, and you ask... So all we're asking is do it the slurry that this group is saying so that they can all learn the same way. But remember, all water isn't the same. Even distilled water isn't all the same, even though it should be. It's not.
Well, and I think you get in a lot of other places that are a little more dogmatic, a little more aggressive, how to do it. Whereas I see with most of the stuff I see in the groups, it's how I do it. This is how I do it. Take that for what it's worth and go and see what works for you, which is so much more valuable.
Yeah, well, and that's it. And the other thing, especially in the groups, and we've got some amazing they self-manage, they self-moderate, they do all the stuff. I poke in every once in a while to see what's happening, see if there's any fires that are fun to watch. But outside of that, it's all theirs. And when you sit there, what I tell people when they get on those is like, you're going to see 12 amazing growers that do 12 amazing differently things. I mean, they're all different growers and different styles. So find the grower that's resonating with you, like Bodie Tree on there, or Brad Rhodes, or Linda, or back in the day, Bill Burns. I mean, you have all these people on there that really know what they're doing. They've invested a lot of time and energy to grow amazing stuff. Don't follow 6 of them, because all 6 of them are going to do their little slightly different things, and you start incorporating all of them, you could really mess things up. But if you follow Brad, or you follow Bodie, or you just listen to Linda, great. You get all her style down. Next time, follow this guy and use some of Linda's tricks. Go with Brad's tricks. They all have brought so much to this table that they all warrant a platform to speak from.
Yeah.
But be careful, because when you have 6 platforms all speaking the same language but slightly different, that's enough to mess you up. So, pick your weapon, run a race, get to the finish line, and then start a new one and enjoy it. And then have fun doing it, because that's the learning curve should be the joy of this grow. If you're just trying to get to the end to fill your wallet, I mean, it's never going to be lucrative for you. It's not a good game. Yeah. Especially with us. I mean, we're about, learning, torturing, learning, and then succeeding. But if you're not killing plants, you're not learning plants. So
that's right.
I just want to make sure that I got a couple emails. I thought we should get that out there. We will do a much larger one. Linda requested the better, because they're starting to put up old episodes. And, at some point I want to sit down with that community and just say, hey, guys, let's take this Nectar manual. Let's break it back down. We have new stuff to go in it. We had a whole alkalinity chapter. We got some new products. Let's start reducing some of these other pieces. And but it's such an overtaking for somebody. I mean, Bill Burns and a small team of people built that thing into what it is, and it hasn't been changed in, I think, 5 years or something. But and that's an undertaking that Bill did on his own. Love to hate the guy. I love him. Yeah. But the guy poured so much energy into putting that thing together, and it is. I mean, there's people selling those things at retail stores, which I wish you wouldn't, but I've seen it. I've heard about it. I've had customers tell me that, they got the Bible on their shelves for sale. And it's like, well, that's cool that they're into the line so much, because it's that community. Yeah. But nobody else has a 90-page manual on how to use a product line.
No, there's no way you could get someone.
I want to revamp that, though. I think it's time, and it's just give me the time, or find me the time, or find me the guy to do the time. Yeah. Bill did that out of... I mean, I don't know how that guy's a busy man. His whole life, he's got tons of kids. They're always active, and yet he was able to put that out.
He's curious.
Without even telling anybody. He just did it.
It's a real achievement. I mean, he should be on the Nectar Mount Rushmore.
Oh, he is on my Mount Rushmore. Anybody that's ever is like, well, I won't use your line because Bill. It's like, well, then you don't know how to read because of Bill. I mean, Bill brought us this piece. Yeah. And, there's a lot of other guys, like Josh is busted ass, and there's a lot of people that have been a part of that. Dwayne Wheeler. Mm-hmm. A lot of people helped the pieces. Bill dedicated to make it happen, and, it's a great piece, but I think right now what we're seeing is with time, with the difference of industry changing, with, the bar between, or the separation between quality and bulk has become greater. Yeah. I think it's time we kind of look at the bigger one and just streamline it, clean it up, add some new components to it, re-release it, and watch that thing go. Yeah. I just need a new Bill Burns in my life. And not that Bill Burns is gone. He's just a busy man doing other life things.
And he's done that. Been there, done that. Someone else needs to take the baton.
And I left. Yeah. So good on Bill. He's a great guy, but that's what needs to come. So with a lot of these, you can find conflict from 14 years of information, because it's 14 years of evolution of the product line. Yeah. So, as we force, and like I said, the feeding schedule at the beginning, 100 growers. So it's either 33% more, 33% less, or 33% or that feeding schedule. So it's a reference guide.
Good show. Good show.
Do.
Yep. All right. I think that's it, eh?
Rock and roll.
Okay. All right. I'm turning off the camera.
All right, Bob.
The OCGFAM show. It's pretty good. It happens every day. It's the OCGFAM show. See you tomorrow.